What's going on, everybody? This is Afro Think Tank. South Korean woman talks about how South Korea has exploited the African American community, via K-pop for their own cultural enrichment, right? And how now they're being called out because now that, the age of information, everybody's finding out what this K-pop is, where it came from, how does it work. Now, what I don't understand, right? And I maybe if you're a Korean and you're into K-pop, you could tell me in the comment section that I know that Koreans and like as they grow up, their youth is so stressful because of the educational pipeline that y'all got. Y'all don't really have time for like social life. There's no time to have a life to where you can come up with some of this stuff that's talked about on, the K-pop. And even your K-pop bands are manufactured products from companies, not really organic like in America. Somebody, well, I want to be a singer, and they try their best to be singers and they go do little side shows, whatever. You guys like have a whole manufacturing like academy where you guys like train to become a group, right? It's totally different. It's not organic, right? So I wonder, like when y'all sing these songs, where does the passion come from? Like, do they write their own songs? Because for the life of me, I don't think that these Korean artists could possibly write their own songs because they don't have the experience that they're talking about on, in the K-pop songs, because most of them are too busy taking tests, studying for the tests, getting out of school, going to after school, and then getting out of after school and going to tutoring and going to sleep for like 3 hours, waking up and doing it all over again until they become adults, and then they become slaves for corporate. Like they're literally slaves from the time they're born all the way up via their educational system to a slavery employment pipeline. So where do they have the free time to create these in situations where they are expressing themselves about all these things about life when they don't even get to experience life, right? And you see how it stimulates them, right? Like I heard that there was a whole bunch of like music execs who came to America on purpose, studied African Americans and how we do things, went there and literally made a whole package and created K-pop, right? They just manufactured artificially, not organic, not coming from the roots. Like this was a manufactured industry that is flourishing, by the way, and it's the most popular music genre in Korea, right? How come other people's music that originate from them don't pop off globally? You know what I mean? Like, is there not any Korean music that's traditionally Korean that could pop off globally, that they can use to express themselves? Everybody has to use the black voice, the black style, right? The black spirit to disseminate their own cultural, spiritualities, their own cultural things. They fight against their own machines within their own country to express themselves. Like without the black voice, without the black creativity, how does everybody else express themselves in a way that anybody's gonna listen? That's what I want to know. But anyway, this Korean lady's about to break down, K-pop and how they're being exposed and they really can't handle it, and it's kind of like it's causing all kind of issues. I bet you there's even some Koreans who didn't know that the K-pop comes from us. I bet you they didn't even know that, right? It was probably by design. Anyway, you guys tell me what you think in the comment section. It's Afro Think Tank. Learn some detail. I'm out.
What's the difference between these two photos? The one on the right is actually black. Over the past 5 to 10 years, Korea has blown up on the international stage. Whether you know about Korea because of Squid Game, because of K-pop, or KBBQ, or because of Son Heung-min or Faker, it's undeniable that Korea has been trending online. And with that means all of our flaws are under the microscope for everyone to see. When I was a kid, I didn't have to think about criticizing Korea because no one thought about Korea at all. The first time I started getting really into K-pop was around 2013. I fell in love with it because it was the first time I'd seen Asians being portrayed as undeniably cool. It had never occurred to me that Asians could be the main characters in our own stories. We were always the side character, the nerd, the comedic relief. We were the Cho Changs and the Mr. Miyagis. Good Asian representation was hard to find, let alone Korean representation. I particularly loved 21 because of how rebellious and edgy they were, especially when compared to typical girl groups of that time like Wonder Girls or Girls' Generation. Their raw emotions in songs like Ugly and It Hurts really stuck out to me. But what I didn't know back then was that the whole sound and image of rebellion was based on emulating black culture. In high school, I had few, if any, black people in my life, so I didn't recognize these similarities. K-pop is drawn from American pop, and American pop pulls heavily from black culture. In fact, most modern genres of music today are deeply intertwined with black culture. Whether it's pop, jazz, rock, hip hop, R&B. Most music today can be traced back to a black pioneer. And yet, most of the world remains deeply anti-black. It's like they say, they want the rhythm but they don't want the blues. Back before K-pop blew up in America, there weren't really many people criticizing K-pop for cultural appropriation. Most Koreans would regard elements of cultural appropriation as just inspiration. In fact, they would find the unequal power relationship to lie in America being stronger than Korea, rather than Koreans appropriating black culture. Koreans only really have one ethnic group, so there's a lot of conflation between race and nation. So because America is bigger and more powerful than Korea, they think of course it's natural that we emulate them. But that only makes sense if you ignore the unequal race relations in America. Koreans are not immune to anti-blackness. Pre-modern Korea was a deeply status-driven society, and skin color was heavily associated with your class background. If you were darker, that meant you were poorer, and that meant you were lesser than. That kind of history and thinking doesn't go away overnight. So when Japan surrendered and American troops moved in to occupy Korea, the Koreans saw the different way that Americans treated someone based on skin color. The military at that point was still segregated. They saw that black people were put into more menial positions in the military and called slurs by their white superiors. Korean businesses that cropped up around these military bases were told by military officials that they could serve whites only or blacks only, not both. Even when it came to prostitutes, a woman who had slept with a black soldier was no longer then allowed to be touched by a white man. She was considered dirty and tainted. Even other prostitutes would look down on her for having been with a black man because they would say, "Why would you do that? You're not going to make as much money anymore because black people don't have as much money as these white soldiers. There are not as many of them either." And of course, there were people who looked down on black people because they were darker skinned as well. Some Koreans did actually identify more with black Americans than white Americans. The discrimination that black Americans faced resonated with their own experiences of racism under Imperial Japan. Modern music was introduced to Korea in the 1920s through Japan. At the time, jazz was incredibly popular. After the Korean War ended with a stalemate and Americans' military presence in Korea was indefinite, the American presence in Korea wasn't limited to just soldiers. American music became popular as well. There were swing jazz clubs around military bases, and people would also just hear American music on the radio. One of the most popular Korean genres at this time was trot music. This was influenced by Japanese enka and American jazz, among other things. And K-pop as we know it would enter the scene around the late 80s and early 90s. And in this way, black music came to be loved, while black people were still seen as lesser. Half black, half Korean children were seen as lesser than by both Koreans and Americans. White Americans looked down on them being black and Asian, while black Americans viewed them as foreign. Koreans looked down at them for their American fathers and for their darker skin. Yoon Mi-rae, an iconic first-generation K-pop and hip-hop singer, spoke about this in her song Black Happiness. She mentions how she had to lighten her skin and straighten her hair to be in the Korean music industry. The racism she saw wasn't just on the Korean side, but the American side as well, with her father being a black man in the military. In some ways, I can understand the ignorance and appropriation in early K-pop. Hip-hop was an emerging genre. Many Koreans identified more with being a third world country than with a modern superpower. Their economy had just taken off. Conversations about race were just hitting the mainstream in America, let alone reaching Korea yet. So on the one hand, I wasn't entirely surprised to see this pre-debut video of CL singing the N-word. It was in like 2008, and even in America, there were white people singing along to the N-word in songs. But when the videos of Blackpink singing the N-word, well, minus Jisoo, when that came out, I was shocked. I thought by around the 2016 era, by then, surely they must know that's not right. Especially given that members like Jennie and Rosé had spent significant time, if not grown up, in the Western world. Then again, Australia and New Zealand's track record with racism isn't that great either. But also, what do we expect from a multi-million-dollar company? The whole sound is based on hip-hop and black music, even more than the average K-pop company. So for Blackpink to not apologize or acknowledge it and just continue having a successful career, I'm not entirely surprised. The whole K-pop industry only cares about money. I even have a Korean friend who doesn't think that K-pop should be considered real Korean music. So they're not gonna care unless their profits are affected. But what about the musicians themselves? These people who supposedly love this music so much that they want to pursue a whole career based on it. While many of them will credit black artists as huge sources of inspiration for them, most are reluctant to make a clear political statement about anything because the company might get them in trouble for losing them money. Nonetheless, you should try to give back to the community that has given you so much. If your whole career is based on emulating black artists, you should maybe care about the black people that created that music. I do think the K-pop industry is changing, albeit very, very slowly, simply because they have way more American fans now than they ever did. So now they need to become a little more culturally conscious of things in American culture if they don't want their profit to be affected. So I do think it's helpful for people to keep pressing K-pop idols for things that they have done that are problematic. For example, Kiss of Life. And I'm not saying this to promote cancel culture, which is already bad enough in Korea, but I do think that people need to be told something is wrong in order to know that they shouldn't be doing it. Now, it shouldn't be up to black people to educate everyone. And I think a lot of these K-pop companies should hire somebody who will be maybe like a cultural sensitivity monitor. People say, what's wrong with sharing culture? We should be able to exchange culture. I agree with that, but it should be an equal exchange. Otherwise, it's not sharing, it's stealing. It's not sharing when darker-skinned and black Koreans and mixed-race Koreans still face so much discrimination. Korea has a lot of social problems, especially when it comes to women and race. And K-pop doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's influenced by those problems as well. Korea was one of the poorest countries in the world less than 50 years ago, and culture takes a lot longer to change than the economy, especially since the first few decades of South Korea were ruled under military dictatorships that cared more about improving the economy than about solving these issues. At the end of the day, if Korea still wants to have a global media presence, then they need to get better on their media training. At the end of the day, you should be listening to the markets where you're trying to create and maintain a presence. You can't have your cake and eat it too.
As someone who's been living outside the US for almost 2 years now, I can so definitively see Black American culture as a blueprint. Obviously, I already knew this being in the US, but leaving the US made me see how this manifests on an international scale. This manifests in music. I go to the gym, they're always playing 2000s hip-hop. 99% of the time, it's Black artists. Same with fashion, streetwear, that's Black attire. Speech patterns as well. But yeah.
山对山来爱对爱，蜜蜂采花深山来，蜜蜂本为采花子，两山花为祝英台，咦啦，两。
Free Sudan! Boycott diamonds and gold! Free Sudan! Boycott diamonds and gold! We most definitely cannot forget about the people of Sudan!
Thanks for watching Afro Think Tank. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And follow me on Substack and Patreon for more content. Remember, it's Pan-Africanism or nothing.